just doing a quick level check again, because we're about to start the stories and we don't want everything to be all over the fucking place, okay?
Doing from exponential potential to not being able to pay for the rental or even a bill from the dental. The house, that for your mental. I've been through hard times too. The situation demand, I bring the hard rhymes through. That's why I'm raw times too. Half past despicable, last man to bring it through. Fast raps and critical stats, analytical slap. I'm hitting you smack.
Howdy. This is Breakup Gaming Society, home of America's least responsible board game podcast, and I'm your host, the Great Unclean One, talking to you from Starkville, Colorado, where I always talk about the same three things: what I'm drinking, what I'm playing, and what I've been listening to. By playing, I mean board games, which is the central pillar of this show. So let's get right down to it. Drink of the week. We've talked about it before. It's Milagro Reposado. This will be less about the drink and more about what happened when I had too much of it and started drunk dialing old friends. Game of the week. It's not an actual game because we're going to tell a bunch of stories. We are going to read the winner from our Boardgames and Debauchery story contest, along with a few amusing runners-up that I wanted to spotlight. These minor debacles feature chess, poker, cosmic encounter, and one made-up bar game that doesn't even have a name. Track of the week. Miami bass is going to get its props today, and I'm not talking about the booty bass that started, forging hits in around 93, 94. I'm talking about crazy-ass Orlando, Liberty City stuff from around 88. And what happens when one of their very best gets their hands on a house track. That's all coming up in episode 78 of Breakup Gaming Society. I thank you for taking the ride, and hopefully we have enough crazy, nutty stories to make it worth your time. Here comes Drink of the Week.
Slap, I'm hitting you smack. I'm sticking you smack lips to stack chips, all with the lyrical technique.
So I've recommended Milagro Reposado tequila before on this show as a pleasant and reasonably priced tequila. What I would not recommend is doing what I did about a month ago, which is knock down about 500 milliliters of it straight and start calling people on the phone. It appears my traditional warm season switchover from bourbon to lighter drinks still has a few kinks in the plan. Those bourbon bottles would last longer. They were higher proof. They hit back a little harder. Milagro Reposado felt like soda pop. So light, so sweet, so pliant at just 80 proof. I was working on something, taking big slugs right out of the bottle at my work table, and I was startled to look over and see that I'd already crushed half the fifth. And I felt just dandy. So I got TC on the phone. He's good Midwestern stock. If you don't have a jolly Midwestern friend who's worked in the trades his whole life, get one. They pick up ringing phones, and they'll talk to you. It's remarkable. Anyway, I started requesting some clarification on some wild stories TC told me on our last call about his experiences as a teenage boy when he apprenticed at a steel foundry in Saginaw, Michigan in the 70s, and he let me record some of it. Think you've had some shitty jobs? TC broke down some stories about what it's like working with molten metal.
We had hot metal cranes that came through the plant full of iron, and they would take iron from the cupola.
What the fuck's a cupola?
Well, that's where they melt the iron. This is like a 4-story tube that they put all of the scrap iron and steel and everything to make the iron. Yeah, but it's like a 4-story bucket. Then, when it got to the right temperature, which is around 3,200 degrees.
That's awful hot, sir.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And when it hits your skin, if like a little drop of it hits your skin, it burns you and then flies off because of the moisture in your skin kind of pushes it off. It hits your skin and flies off because it's so hot and the moisture in your skin throws it off, but you still end up, still got scars on my arms from that.
If I'm guessing, they're mostly on your forearms.
Yeah, but I was working on an automatic iron pour where the molds came by and this big tank above was full of iron, and these stoppers would pull up and start pouring in the mold. And if the mold sand was too wet, it would blow out the sides and hit you like right in the neck with molten iron. Then it'd go down your shirt.
Oh no.
Oh yes. And one time, seriously, it stopped right on the end of my dick.
We also chatted a bit about what it was like working in a union shop.
So what year was this? You said you were 17 or 18?
Yeah, this was 70 through 78. I worked there.
So this would have been a union shop, correct?
Oh yes. UAW 668. But it made it so you got paid a decent wage to do this kind of stuff. Like, I went there because that was the best paying jobs in town.
The union got you some protections, but they didn't run the place. There was always a fucking foreman there who, if you got fucking hurt, he said you get, and the foreman, who, by the way, is not a union guy, he's from the company, would say, get this fucking line moving, a guy again. This motherfucker's fine. And he would tell people not to report to the nurse, even though he was obviously seriously injured.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. They would tell you all that, and if you let them do it, the next time they'd expect you to not do it. But if you'd stand up and say, fuck you, I'm going to the nurse, I'm going to get this taken care of like I did, when I got burned on the end of my dick. And I go into the nurse and I said, I got a burn that needs to be treated. And she said, I'll take care of it. And I said, I don't know about that. And she said, why? And I said, it's on the end of my dick. And she gave me some burn ointment and a Band-Aid and said,
and leave me alone. Is that what happened to you?
Basically. Yeah. I worked when I was pouring iron on the, V8 block line. It was half hour on, half hour off. Right?
Now that sounds pretty humane, but that must have been a brutal 30 minutes.
See, the cooling air that was blowing on you was 140 degrees.
So that's cooling?
Yeah. That was the safety department that came down and did that because they were trying to take away our half hour on, half hour off. A new general foreman came in and says, we're not doing this shit anymore, right? And the next day, they were short like 60 iron pourers. Everybody just called in. Then it was like the next day, that general foreman's boss says, you keep your mouth shut and you let them do what they need to do.
And while I never worked anything that grueling in my life, we did have something in common, which was we got to chat a bit about growing up with not much money and how many more different animal parts you're going to find on your dinner plate as a result. Now, back in the farm in Missouri, we got sweetbreads, which other people around us didn't want, but which I later found out was actually a coveted gourmet food. Who knew? But here's what happened on TC's family's dinner table back in Flint, Michigan.
I was one of 9 kids, we didn't have a whole lot. When we growing up, the only time we ever got McDonald's was when my parents went out for their anniversary. We ate organ meat all the time.
Did you ever eat gizzards?
Oh yeah, man. My mom used to buy like gizzards by the pound, and we'd fight over them. Did you ever eat the marrow out of the bone on the round steak?
Well, yes, but only in recent fancy restaurants where all of a sudden marrow became some kind of fancy appetizer dish, and cooks would roast it down, and you'd get an appetizer, and you get an appetizer in 2010 where they take like the femur of a cow or whatever, and they'd fucking cross section it and give you liquid marrow to spoon on your toast. And now it's seen as a luxury, but it's funny because Terry, what it really was peasant food. Marrow was the shit you ate when you couldn't afford the rest of the cow.
I know. Our parents were raised during the, Depression. So you ate whatever you could get. Can't count the times that we ate heart. You know how tough heart is?
Um,
It's a solid muscle. There is no fat to that thing, and it is chewier than hell. My mom could cook anything. We would eat. Did you ever have a head cheese? It's like they cut all the meat off of the head and they mix it with some sort of gelatinous mess and they sell it as lunch meat. I've never had it where it was any good.
Okay, so thank you. Let's review. Milagro Reposado? Yes. Kill almost a fifth by yourself and then start dialing your way down the contact list? Generally, no. Unless there's somebody on the other end who likes to shoot the shit and is generally used to getting calls from drunks. Thanks for being a sport, TC. That turned out to be a fun and educational chat. Next up, 4 stories from our Board Games and Debauchery contest.
Slap, slap, I'm hitting you smack, smack, I'm sticking you smack lips to stack chips, all with the lyrical technique.
So if you remember, back in May, we opened entries for our Board Games and Debauchery contest. So Game of the Week is really a story fest this time out. 4 different answers to the question, what happens when chemically altered people play board games or games of any kind? Our first answer comes from Mr. Matt Thrower. You may have met Matt if you read board game reviews in places like IGN or GamesRadar.com. He's a UK-based guy who won this year's contest with a story about playing chess on LSD. Goes like this. All that night there had been twice as many stars as usual. At one point, lying on the warm sand of a golf course bunker and giggling at the splendor of it, I had genuinely believed myself to be at the center of the cosmos, nothing but a void filled with twinkling points of celestial light beneath me. Such is the awesome power of LSD. Now, the summer dawn heralded a new day and the slow, sad return of reality. Back in the shelter of the flat, what better way to reconcile our blown minds to the inevitable than with a nice game of chess? So we get out the set, geometric pieces carved from soapstone, smooth and cool and reassuringly solid against our disordered senses. And somewhere in whatever brain sits just above the primal lizard, we manage to dredge out the correct way to set up a chessboard. Pawns in front, bracketed by rooks, all is good with the world. Thus armored, we begin to play. Familiar routines reasserting themselves, we each push a pawn in the traditional opening to the dance. I grasp for what comes next. Knights can jump over pawns, right? So my knight jumps over the pawn. Then I do the same with the other knight, for the pleasure of the symmetry. Now I should be able to move a bishop or a rook, but I cannot. My line of pawns lies static, broken only by the single advancing soldier. Something is wrong. But what? Slowly it dawns on me that when knights jump over pawns, it's not supposed to be any pawn of my choosing. It's especially not supposed to be the one that I've pushed forward already, thrusting my brave cavalry way out to the front of the board, trying to check my opponent's king, but also adjacent to their pawn line. Oh no. Unless I move my knights, they'll be taken. Reaching to grab them back, 3 things occur to me in quick succession. Firstly, that we never agreed any friendly rules about takebacks. Second, that even if we had, there's probably some rule I've overlooked about not moving 2 pieces at once. Thirdly, the threat from my opponent's pawns is imaginary. They've all gone. Trying to focus on the wider board, I realized that in the space of my making 2 moves, all 8 of the enemy pawns have moved, as have some of mine, and are now making a delightful zigzag pattern of ebony and ivory along the outskirts of the board. It's a lovely pattern, the black and the white each reflecting the glow of the dawn in different intensities, the perfect spacing and juxtaposition of the diagonals so pleasing to the eye. It would be a shame to move them back, but how to replace them? Cigarettes would seem the obvious choice. My brand is Marlboro Lights, that of my friend is Lambert and Butler, so they'll be easy to tell apart. I begin to replace the missing pawns with tubes of tobacco, teetering dangerously on their filtered tips. A careless sweep of a loose sleeve, and they are all scattered like 9-pins. Affronted, my opponent retrieves one of his pawns from the board, lights it, and begins to blow smoke rings. Or was it one of mine? I replace it with a lighter, but things are now getting out of hand. If bishops move on the diagonal, how is it that queens are supposed to move? This makes no sense. The rook is now a tube of Mentos. What on earth is going on here? The geometric pleasure of the line of pawns begins to look more and more like a sculpture. Soon, we are collaborating, color matching the aesthetics of different pieces against different colored squares, against the rectangular lines of one another, against the makeshift detritus that now litters the board. The game completed, we sit back in the ever-lightening room, and reality still seems a very long way away. But even now, 30 years after that game, the question about it still haunts me. In the after-match discussion, how did we both end up agreeing that I'd lost? There you go. Bravo, Mr. Thrower. Per the terms of the contest, Matt will receive a copy of Dustin Hyman's story collection, Gutter Punks, and Breakup Gaming Society's 2024 cocktail booklet, Chaotic Shots and Cocktails That Will Hurt Your Friends. I would also urge you to follow Matt's work on IGN.com and GamesRadar.com. He's a lucid craftsman who does an exceptional job of showing you new board games, what they do, and where they fail or excel. Give my man's a read. Next, I'm going to share with you 3 runners-up whose entries I liked and thought deserved a read. First, let's leave the hanging question of who won Matt's acid chess match and move over to the poker table, where our friend Smudge from the Netherlands goes back to their college days. Smudge tells it like this. This story isn't exactly about tabletop, because, to be honest, I have always found drinking during tabletop gaming to be at best counterproductive to my experience, even in my ill-fated college years. But I can tell you a story about a regular nickel poker night we used to have at my friend's apartment when we were in college. Every few weeks, and a regular group of people would gather around my friend's dining table to partake in a ferociously random series of poker games. Some deals would be amusing hands of midnight baseball. Hands are secret, 3s and 9s wild, and if you turn over a 4, you get more cards. Or what have you. The drinks were largely communal and cheap. A regular favorite was off-label vodka and instant country time iced tea lemonade. At one point, the host, John, had purchased a liquor called 99 Bananas, a 99-proof clear hooch that tasted like you left a banana-flavored candy in your shot glass of paint thinner. We all suffered a taste of this foul stuff, and it landed immediately on top of the fridge, as all liquor in the college apartment was stored, where it began to collect dust. One of our more irregular guests, let's call him Mac, was known for being something of a mooch, especially when it came to the booze. So as a running joke, John offered Mac the 99 Bananas with the promise that he could have something more palatable once he managed to get his way through the bottle of 99 Bananas. This took probably half a dozen poker nights over several months, but John was prepared for this. When Mac triumphantly held up the empty bottle of 99 Bananas to a chorus of cheers, and then asked for something else to drink that wasn't crafted from moldy banana peels, John handed him a brown paper bag as a gift. A brand new bottle of 99 blackberries. Mac didn't find it quite as funny as the rest of the party and stormed out of the apartment, leaving the bottle behind. Nobody actually made Mac drink the 99 blackberries in the end, when he finally came back to nickel poker night. Whether it was John's intention to continue the punishment or rescinded it due to self-reflection, we'll probably never know. Thank you for that one, Smudge, and if any of you have any deadbeats in your game group in terms of showing up with something to eat or drink, I hope you're taking notes. Smudge's friend's approach seems just and tactically sound to me. Smudge, your copy of our cocktail booklet is on the way. As this next one demonstrates, you don't even need cards or chips to make a fun and cathartic drinking game. I hit up my man Ben Cake on LinkedIn with a notice about the contest, and he recounted a tale about a drinking game he and his colleagues made up. Having also been a creative in 2 startups where we knew, 6 months before the fact, that there wasn't enough runway or revenue or market adoption, I can relate to Ben's tale, which he puts to us in the form of a missive. Dear Breakup Gaming Society, This entry is not strictly part of the tabletop category your contest is mandated, but it is a game so thoroughly honors chemical excess and debauchery that it would feel like a crime not to share it with your esteemed community. If this disqualifies me, that's okay. I get disqualified from things all the time. Seriously, all the time. The game is called Inappropriate Analogy Man, and very few people know about it because it was invented by a demoralized creative team while working for a failing startup. Its origin story is brief. The company was burning more than $1 million a month, and its leaders had succumbed to a form of infighting that caused projects to get started, and then paused, and then started again, and then killed altogether. It gradually turned our team's office, affectionately called Brand Camp, into a snow globe of contempt. What had started months before as collegial drinks at 5 on Fridays devolved into drunk bitch sessions that started around lunch. We were hungry for some simple joy, and we found it with Inappropriate Analogy Man. Unlike cards, which can get complicated, or darts, which can get dangerous, the game requires very little of its participants. You drink. You converse as you always would while drinking, and then, at various unexpected times, you respond to someone who has just spoken with, "Yeah," followed by the most inappropriate analogy you can invent at the moment. Here's an example. Anna. It's so annoying when you're trying to work on a plane and the person next to you keeps reading your emails. Ben. Yeah, I hear you. It's like the time I gouged a man's eye out because he was looking askance at my beans. The example above is not a reference from past games. One of the game's 2 rules is that all lines must be spontaneous and none can ever be repeated. As you'll note, the example includes 1. A warm agreement, 2. Objectionable violence, 3. The higher register of askance, and 4. The inclusion of beans. The goal is to pack as much dissonance into your analogy as possible so as to flood the recipient with conflicting emotions. You are essentially giving the gift of agreement and then invalidating it with lunacy, thereby causing them to feel uncomfortably implicated by the fact that you're on the same page. The other rule of the game, especially with those who are aware they're playing, is that no one can laugh. If you laugh, you have to drink more. Be forewarned, this game will alienate people. There were times when well-meaning colleagues would wander into the Brand Camp to say hello and soon decide that now's not a good time. If genteel small talk can break the ice, this game puts the ice in a wood chipper and sprays it everywhere. Some people, by nature, don't like chunks of flying ice and will scurry to safer ground. Others, however, will shout, "Look, ice," then fall to the floor to make snow angels. This is to say that while the game will alienate, that alienation only helps you quickly single out the folks who are down for some debauchery. Personally, I call these people friends. Well, Mr. Cake, you've made a friend in us with your contribution. Thanks for sharing the story and the picture showing you that you've already received your copy of the cocktail booklet. You're a gentleman and a craftsman. For those out there in the marketing land, take a look at Ben's body of work. His elegant and impressive portfolio can be seen at mrbencake.com. That's MRBENCAKE.com. He's done a lot of good stuff. Anyway, this last story comes from the voluble and generous Mr. Brendan Costello, one of the best podcasting allies I met on Twitter before that utterly lost, broken, and over-resourced South African dude tried to remake the site in his image. Economically, a lot of people laugh at how he overpaid in the deal, but as an autobiographical testament, it's perfect. In either case, Brendan told us about 2 debacles involving Cosmic Encounter, a fast-moving game about interstellar negotiation and conquest that hinges on a highly variable group of tangy, spacefaring races, each with a wild, unique power designed to more or less break or upset the game state, and break Brendan's patience, apparently. Here's from one of his accounts. Quote, Cosmic Encounter is the worst board game in existence. I've played it exactly 3 times and really hated it for 2 of them. I only mostly hated it the 3rd time. The 2nd time, I was playing with a couple of friends who were romantically involved. One managed to snag the zombie race character. I won't bore you with details about how the zombie is broken. Just trust me when I say that it is. He was smarmy about it, too, so me and his partner ganged up on him. He got so mad he chugged a tall glass of straight gin, for some reason, and stormed off into the woods behind his house. After finding him, we spent the rest of the night babysitting him while he puked and whined about how he'd ganged up on him. This night is still referred to as the night upon which he shamed his dojo. Terrible. End quote. Yeah, I reached back out to Brendan to talk this one through because it hit close to home. I also, as it turns out, was part of a cosmic encounter debacle that was my fault. See, I believed the Shut Up and Sit Down review where Quentin Smith said, "This is the reason board gaming exists," or something to that effect. We owned it and played it regularly, particularly in a quartet with my wife and I and our favorite couple, Jay and Becca. And we played it pretty straight. You get a nutty alien race that's trying to capture a winning count of planets by organizing successful invasions of enemy systems while using your race's powers to maximum effect. But then I started reading Reddit forums and realized we were only effing around. These players on these threads, they were taking the game's logic to a devious level. Really? I guess I'm going to retake it after this asshole's done with his horn. Boy, how far am I from the true feeling and longing of a Johnny Cash song, huh? His train songs are always about country folk excited to get back to their region, see their family, see their sweethearts. I'm sitting here with the train going by, ew, my podcast, ew. Where were we? Yes, we were talking about how inadequate our home games of Cosmic Encounters started to feel when I was reading about how these Reddit deviants were playing it, right? They were maximizing the implied negotiation and treachery in the rules for games that made ours sound like a bunch of Regency-era mannequins comparing gardens over tea. So one night I decided to play the Reddit way, except I really didn't cue the others in to the wild new direction I was heading. I orchestrated massive invasions, then I'd play cards that ruined them. I lied. I double-dealt. I was drunk and caused chaos. What I was doing was within the rules, but I had broken the tacit diplomatics with which we usually played them. My last memory was my wife cussing me out. Per decorum, we had walked Jay and Becca to the door. She opened the door for them and they slunk out, but her gaze never left me, and we never even said goodbye to them as she coruscated me. I had fucked up the game in an attempt to optimize it, which is an interesting study in how groups agree to play the metagame and how we bring our best and worst selves to the table. I had tried on a pose, trying to be something I'd heard about, and ruined it for others. So there it is. All the entries for the Boardgames and Debauchery story contest. Thank you to Matt Thrower, Smudge, Ben Cake, and Brendan Costello for giving us entertaining tales and something to think about. Now it's time for some motherfucking Miami bass.
Slap, slap, I'm hitting you, smack, smack, I'm sticking you, smack lips to stack chips, all with the lyrical technique.
But there's one place where I see middle-aged heads missing. And they seem to miss then, and they still miss now. I think it might depend on where you grew up, but I'm talking about Miami bass, which was, basically electro with nutso scratching, ear-splitting bass and filthy rhymes, sometimes. Sometimes it was just production stuff. Generally, while they'd copy a Miami bass beat, New York generally looked down on these guys because they weren't lyrical. Miami bass MCs sounded like square dance callers compared to the mic artistry coming out of places like, Brooklyn and the Bronx. Two Life Crew got booed in New York, and while I can understand why, there's no reason for the continuing decades of disregard. These guys had an irreducible energy, and some of the sickest DJs and producers in the game. What they did to a Kraftwerk-style beat was like what the Ramones did to wheezing moribund rock and roll, old musty chord progressions. They turned it into a crazy, funny party in Liberty City where anything can happen and should happen. Their aggression and instincts were pristine, and their stuff stands up, in my mind, against the hypest, big beat or break beat or other kinds of techno that hit U.S. airwaves in the 90s. It's a great reminder that, production and style-wise, how much American hip-hop's branches mingle with the, branches of electronic music. To this day, you still see the big threads on social media where guys my age talk about, the canon of the great late 80s albums. You hear the same entrance over and over. Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back by Public Enemy, Critical Beatdown by Ultramagnetic, Criminal Minded by Any Means Necessary by Boogie Down Productions, Eric B. and Rakim's first two albums. Personally, I think Follow the Leader is 10 times more important than Paid in Full, but we can talk about that later. But I'm going to make a case for DJ Magic Mike out of Orlando, who released Bass is the Name of the Game in the year 1988. The year really, it all happened for the new school. Exhibit A, how Magic Mike took the late 80s trend of having a house track on your album. EPMD did it, Big Daddy Kane did it, De La Soul did it in their own arch and artsy way, and treats it like a real workout. I don't think it's any accident that Orlando later evolves into an electronic music mecca. I mean, I was reading about the Chemical Brothers would do crazy shows down there long before anybody in the U.S. knew who they were. Right there in the shadow of Disney World or Disneyland, whatever, they're both pieces of shit. Miami break style extended all the way to the days of, 2000s producers and DJs like DJ Baby Ann and Icy. And it just seems that kind of stuff just got into people's bloodstream down there and never left. Here you're going to hear a bunch of crazy breakdowns, bits of the indestructible and foundational sample Apache by the Bongo Band. That same sample also along with the same sample that drove Mona Lisa by Slick Rick. Some nutso scratching and signature Miami-based studio effects like bells and staccato vocal stutters.
Right!
To show you how much he packs in here, here's another break from the same song, just to let you know he's not going to let you up for air. Magic Mike packs in so much here.
The purpose of this record is to keep the groove. The purpose of this record is to keep the groove.
Like I said, there were plenty of New York and LA acts who threw a club or house track on an LP kind of as a novelty or something fun, but Mike just makes them all look half-assed. Well, except for Stetsasonic. Their Miami bass cut was actually a tribute where they rhymed about how much fun they had in Miami and how much they liked the sound. And this is just one track. I don't even have time today to show you any of the other favorites from this slab. Lower the Dynamite, Eminem's Getting Off, Feel the Bass Again, Drop the Bass Part 2, The Booty Dub, and others. It's a powerhouse. This album is massive, and I think it belongs, at least for its production chops, in the same pantheon with the best of the East Coast seminal works of 1988, if maybe not for the same reasons. If you're not up and moving when this is playing, you have cardinal defects in your character that are beyond my powers or influence. That's the show. I would once again remind you that if you like what I do and how I do it, please support the show by heading to breakupgamingsociety.com and hit the donate page. For a $10, I will slide you a copy of my cocktail booklet, Chaotic Shots and Cocktails That Will Hurt Your Friends. Oddly enough, your contribution will help a friend. That's me, your host and friend, the Great Unclean One. Until next time, may you fight long and well.